Welcome to Around the Empire. This is a Swapcast with Kyle Anzalone of the Conflicts of Interest podcast, and I'm Joanne Leon, the host of the Around the Empire podcast. Around the Empire podcast, fully independent. Lend your support to patreon.com/aroundtheempire or paypal.me/aroundtheempirepod. Also, please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. Today we discuss the 2020 election, the upcoming electoral college vote, the protests, and some of Biden's potential picks for high-level positions like Mike Morrell as the director of the CIA. We also talk about the risk of war with Iran and other issues in the Middle East and more. We recorded this on December 13th, 2020.
Hey Joanne, how's it going? How you doing today?
Hey Kyle, thanks so much for doing another Swapcast. We haven't done this in a while.
Yeah, I mean, we really need to do another episode together. I think we've probably done like 5 or 6 shows together this year. And I mean, the range of subjects that we have covered, like going back to the Soleimani assassination in January, and that's not like, I guess when that happened, I thought 2020 would be the year of war with Iran, where basically everything that we were doing was trying to stop that war from happening. And now most people don't even remember that assassination. And while the Trump administration has been able to continue to turn up the heat on Iran, I don't know if the worst they didn't have the momentum or what, but and I mean, we may talk about it a little bit more later. Not that there's not the threat of war with Iran, but that wasn't ever news. It hasn't been since February. So Iran doesn't even make the news when the U.S. sanctions are, starving people to death and depriving people of medicine in the pandemic-stricken country, which seems like it'd be a hell of a story to run against Donald Trump. Mr. COVID-denying Trump is, depriving the Iranians of medicines because he's such a terrible person and hates Barack Obama's nuclear deal. But, that's not the top and most important news story for everyone. And so maybe we should talk about what is the top and most important news story today as the electoral college will go to vote. And that is the election. And I guess there's, this YouTube censorship thing. And so everybody's being real careful about how they say things. And so I will say this, there are a lot of people who believe that there are something wrong with the results of the election. And so Joanne, I'll let you open with anything you have to say.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So I'll just cite one poll, but I think that there's probably a lot of different polls, and I frankly I don't have that much faith in polls. But we can also, so we have to rely on sort of what we see with our own eyes too. And it seems pretty clear that there is a large chunk of the country who thinks there was something seriously wrong with this election. And there's a whole spectrum of reasons why. And because of the decentralized nature of the election, it was always going to take, it always takes a long time to fully analyze, so I'm not surprised that it's not all organized and summarized and bullet listed and prioritized yet. But anyway, the electoral college meets Monday, and let me just look at my notes. Washington Post just Sunday reported a CBS News poll that said that 62% of registered voters believe the election is over and that it's time to move on. So that doesn't say a lot about, how they feel about the election, just that, they're like, okay, let's get this over with. But 75% of Republicans, I guess among those registered voters, said they believe that it's not over and it should still be contested. And just 18% of the people who voted for Trump, based on this poll, here in 2020, voted for him in 2020, said that they consider Biden the legitimate winner. Now, you have to take grains of salt and consider some people who will sort of never concede and that kind of thing. But there's got to be a significant number of people in there who would be willing to accept the outcome if they believed that everything was on the up and up. And I personally believe they have a lot of reasons to be skeptical, to be worried about what happened, to have a real issue with the way the whole thing went down. And both in the process, in the various problems with the election, but also the reaction of the media, the way the media handled it. On election night, the New York Times released a tweet saying the media is going to call this election, a really bizarre tweet that they later retracted, which makes you wonder, did they do that on purpose, or was it just a real?
Well, can we stop there for a second? Because this is one of the first things I want to say about our election coverage, and that is, we had even talked about possibly doing like a quick like election night show or breakdown or something. But one of the things I believe we said to each other on election night was that, it would be like a PR battle for whoever becomes president, who wins this election. And so maybe this will appease the YouTube censors. In that sense, I think, Joe Biden won this election. I mean, it's called for him, right? Like that's like the narrative among everywhere you see, like every label is President-elect Joe Biden and stuff like that. And so, I guess it seems like he, in the election that I think mattered, I think he won it. So that was kind of my feeling on Biden there.
Yeah, you're. I'm not sure exactly whether you're saying he had the establishment and all of the, based on the 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 war of public opinion, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not even saying like it's like necessarily like a conspiracy and something that was pre-planned or anything like that, but just that that the Biden team effectively used, the news stories that came out and like how the votes were cast and everything to claim victory when he could. And I think that kind of just established it. I feel like you maybe had Trump claim victory earlier, like when he was ahead in the polls on election night, then maybe we could be looking at a different outcome here, just based on how everything goes. But I think, once Biden claimed to be president-elect, then it was over essentially. That was the election. And once people endorsed that, once the mainstream media endorsed Biden's claim, then that's it.
yeah, I mean I agree with that and I disagree with that at the same time. I think that the election night, the way that things were presented, for example, I don't want to get into the weeds of this too much, but just one thing, for example, the way that they, even with large percentage leads, that looked pretty hard to overcome, they would not call a state and give the electoral votes to Trump. Whereas for Biden, I think, I'm pretty sure, and I watched this and then sort of reviewed it after that. They wanted to make sure that the electoral vote total never, um, that Trump never dominated it. And the way that they decided to call the states, with even some ridiculous examples like Virginia, um, they made sure that things were done sort of scripted in such an order that the electoral count would always favor Biden. That was a real tell for me. But just to give you one example, I could do more. Um, I guess where I disagree with you is that the media decided how to handle this based on what the results were as they were coming in. Now the whole thing was weird because you had these two sets of ballots. You had the whole thing was just a train wreck. And I think the way the Trump campaign handled it was a train wreck. But I also think that the Biden campaign overplayed their hand. I think the way the media um, just crushed any conclusion that there was any problems. They right out of the gate started saying there's no problem with this
Yeah.
election before they could ever have possibly done any kind of investigation or analysis.
Right.
And there are a
And
number of people
after
who have
4 years
done
of questioning an election, which was I felt like the most absurd part right away was just that they immediately said you're not allowed to question this, and then some of them are still questioning the 2016 election, and it just seemed obvious.
yeah. So yeah, I do think that there was a plan of pretty much exactly how to handle this. I mean, they can't predict everything that would happen, but I do think that, to get back to my original point, I think that is one of the reasons, and the fact that for the past 4 years, a mainstream media that was already bad got just exponentially bad, to the point where now I find it to be unreadable and unwatchable with very, very few exceptions. It's a complete waste of time, and in fact, it is it's bad for your mental health. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. So
No.
yeah, there's
I,
so much fear and things like that.
yeah. Well, I guess one of the things about the election too that seemed to be problematic for the people who said that you can't question anything about it was just that this was going to be a unique election, right? Like 2020 has been kind of a crazy year, and everybody will agree to that. Like 2020 is a particularly unique year, and honestly, if you had like been
Exactly.
like the French election is kind of a mess. There's some people voted at different times, and it's really confusing. People would be like, oh, well, that kind of made sense. And then it happens here. It's, just you can't even address that fact. And so, like the mail in voting, I guess, isn't obviously like I see the problems that people point to with it and everything like that. But at the same time, had Trump encourage his supporters to mail in vote early, I think it's possible he would have won the election. And I mean, I think it's honestly also possible that the fact that the mail-in voting was happening so far ahead of the election, and that there's mail-in voting I think in just about every state while Trump was in the hospital with COVID, like all these things are huge factors that nobody's able to talk about, because if you have anything to say about mail-in voting, then you're just hateful and terrible.
Yeah, and the Hunter Biden story, and not just Hunter, the Biden family story, was suppressed at a time when I believe early voting was already in process too.
Right.
So yeah, there are a number of things.
Oh, I had
But
a couple notes here, just something to say too about elections. And, me and you are not coming at this as Trump supporters at all. And part of the reason I think is helpful for me and you to have this conversation is politically we're kind of on differing ends. I want to abolish government, and you definitely, I don't think, agree with that, right? And so, I'm a big fan of Ron Paul, and in the 2012 election, I saw them steal Iowa from him. They handed it to Rick Santorum. They used this narrative that Santorum is surging in the polls. Santorum is surging in the polls. There's nothing on the ground in Iowa to indicate this, and he underperformed in the polls. From what they claimed his surge was, but they got him close enough that he was able to claim victory on election night. And I'm not sure how much of a Bernie fan you are, but I know that that's a little bit probably more your political alignment than Ron Paul. And you saw what happened to him in 2016 and in 2020, where I think in 2016 on election night, there were 6 coin flips between him and Hillary Clinton, and all 6 went to Hillary Clinton. And in 2020, the obvious rigging, and Pete Buttigieg declaring victory in an election that he didn't win. And seeing all these examples, I'm skeptical of government, so I'm skeptical of the things they run, and so that's a big reason why I'm interested in this and want to talk about it, is just because I'm not somebody that's going to go along with the government program, no matter what they claim they did and it works or not.
yeah, for that reason, I was a Bernie supporter in 2016, and I watched in real time everything happen. And in that case, we got at least some documented evidence of the rigging, right? So, and then I watched 2020 play out. I was much less enthusiastic about Bernie at that point, but I certainly thought he'd be better than Joe Biden. I was supportive of Tulsi Gabbard, who then turned around. Well, I mean, she was undermined, and I've watched this play out. I watched the whole RussiaGate play out in real time.
Right.
I watched how the media just blatantly lied to the bigger and bigger and bigger lies. And so I came into it with a confirmation bias, not expecting anything close to a fair election this time around. But I tried to keep as a mind as I could. I actually boycotted this election for the first time in my life. I could not vote for either of them, and I couldn't, further than that, I couldn't participate in what I thought was a dangerous sham, not just a sham, not just, corrupt and all this stuff, but with consequences that threw me into a real funk for a period of time after that. And I don't mourn Trump, but believe me, it's not the man. It is the consequences. It is the scale of collaboration. It is the different powers that have sort of coagulated. I can't even think of a word that's sort of scary enough, but put your own word in there. And the consequences, and not just for supporters going forward, I think this is a massive thing, and I feel like not enough people are I shouldn't say that. We're very, I don't know how people feel about this or how much they feel the consequential nature of it. I think a lot of people are just frankly worn out. And also the hardship just piles up and continues with this lockdown. Hardship in every possible way, economic, emotional, all kinds of things. I picked up some numbers about just the number of evictions that are expected. And just the anticipation of losing your home is a devastating, overwhelming thing. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of things like that. The insecurity and the fear that's being pumped into the system. Yeah, I don't know if you heard about this one, and I'm getting a little off topic, but in the UK, they did some kind of a PR commercial for the NHS, the National Health System there, where they took Santa Claus and they said he had COVID and he was on his deathbed. And of course, the NHS, I guess, ends up saving him in the end. But little kid, you're going to go to that length to fearmonger? I mean, what is wrong with this? I've never seen anything like this in my life.
Right.
And I can't just brush it off.
Just on the same as that topic, I saw that some little kid asked Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, if Christmas would happen this year, and he said, "Yeah, Santa would still deliver presents." And I was like, screw this guy. He's like, making kids expect like it's gonna be a normal Christmas when he's banned their parents from working all year. What a horrible person. And I mean, I don't know how much football you've been watching this season, Joanne. I know that it probably hasn't been the most enjoyable year to watch, but if you have been,
not for the team I watch now.
Yeah, the commercials are, I mean, like the thank our healthcare workers, and like, look, I'm not saying like like nurses don't do important work or something like that, but the just like constant like wear a mask, save a healthcare worker kind of narrative is completely exhausting, and I wish it would end, but I don't know. We should probably focus on this election stuff, or we're never gonna get to anything else.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're so tangled together, and there's just so much to say. And we're also now in a position where we've put all this work into these podcasts that we've done, and as much as we've pride ourselves on telling it like it is or how we see it, now we have to self-censor.
Right. Well, can I just say that's one of the reasons that like I was kind of nervous about putting this on the slate to talk about, just because I know that we're both people who are skeptical of government, right? And so that means when the government does something, especially in a unique situation, we're gonna be skeptical. But at the same time, like then I was like, oh well, if I'm not gonna talk about it because I'm scared of YouTube, well, like screw it. That's the reason I have to talk about it, and I have to, make those points. A couple things I was just, curious about, Joanne. And so it seems like every time, at least in my lifetime, from what I remember, every time there's a change of power in president, whether it was from Gore to, or from Clinton to Bush, or Bush to Obama, Obama to Trump, there was a substantial number of people in the country that weren't ready to set the election right away. I mean, Gore contested Florida. Obama was the birther stuff. I mean, there were Republicans who really believed. I was 18 at the time, and I was watching like Fox News. And so like, I kind of like, absorbed that idea that, it was possible that the country was going to be saved, because not because like Obama was a secret Muslim, or because, black people shouldn't be president, but because, he was actually born in Kenya. Yeah, maybe he was raised in Hawaii or whatever, but, if he doesn't have the actual birth certificate, well, the letter of the Constitution, we're going to follow that. And that means this guy can't be president. And, eventually, like I think people kind of like settle in and realize that, look, the same, like 90% of what the government does, no matter what administration, the number's probably a lot higher, doesn't change. And so whatever catastrophic warnings that, Obama was going to like sell the military to Russia, or whatever stupid thing that, Mitt Romney and John McCain put forward and stuff, people realize it's not true. Right. And so, I mean, this time it seems like, this is a little bit more substantive than the birtherism. And I hope I can say that. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'll get the YouTube flag just for saying that. But the birtherism stuff was thin. So I could see people holding on to it for a while. But something, I guess, kind of tells me that the emotions will fade. And part of the reason for this, and I guess part of what we'll talk about, maybe where we could go next, is that as much as I've, read some things that, made me curious about the results of the election and everything, nothing the Trump administration has put forward has seemed compelling at all to me. Not that I'm not saying that there isn't like an example of, maybe some voter tampering or voter fraud that they've been able to raise, but the number of ballots that they would have to like change to get the election overturned, I haven't seen anything from them that resembles anything like evidence to prove, that amount of what they're going to have to prove to make Trump get his second term. You know what I'm saying there?
I do. I don't agree with you, but
Okay.
I'll leave it at that, because I don't want to go into details, because then I will have to say things that the YouTube
Right.
censorship warning specifically warned against, and it's just not worth it. There are plenty of other people doing it. I think it's hard to go through. I think there were some loud, distracting things that maybe weren't the things that should have been paid attention to. I think there are other. Well, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I do disagree on that.
Well, I
And
mean, maybe we could say this. I even noticed that, and I wasn't like, I think as deep as an observer as this is you, but I did pick up that like I would watch like a hearing, and there would be like 2 hours of people that seemed like they didn't seem to have evidence to necessarily prove their claim. It seemed like, what would be called hearsay in court. Like, I heard something, I saw something that looked suspicious. Nothing that I, think would like prove the vast conspiracy or anything like that. But then there would be one person who like farts during their interview, or there was one lady who was obviously a kook. And then that's the only person that people choose to talk about. And, I'm not saying that the other people presented a pile of credible evidence, but it seems like if you're going to cover it, like, it seems unfair to only cover the ones that are obviously, frauds or fools.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I can't see how we could come to the conclusion that the media had any intention of covering it in even a slightly honest way.
For
So
yeah,
I
I mean,
expect that from them now. I really do.
yeah, I felt like there was a little bit of on it. Like people, I said that, and people sent me a couple stories that I'm not saying was like, oh yeah, this is great and perfect and stuff, but it wasn't just completely slightly biased. And they said, did like say like, oh hey, like this is like this lawsuit like could do this, and like they presented it as something that could happen, right? It wasn't just like haha mocking stupid fools. And so not that there's not some evidence, but like 95% of it is all just mocking like this can't be true.
Yeah, so I think there are some parallels to Russiagate here in
Hmm.
that when you have a decentralized election system like we have, and like I'm glad we have, I think a centralized election system in a system where we have so little trust in the authorities would be an even bigger disaster. But I think that you have to dig. You got to really get into details to understand. And they're only a small slice of population who are going to be willing to do that, and an even smaller slice of people who will just take the hours to pore over long documents and data, and there's missing pieces all over the place, and it's it's trickling in, and it's hard to collate. And there's bits of information from all these counties and all these states. It's a very difficult thing to summarize for people to make a compelling argument to the public. And so that that's that's just one of the hurdles. And you had mentioned the 2000 election. Yeah, I think there was turmoil and upset. I think there, is after every election. But this one is more akin to the 2000 election from my experience than any other one. And although, I mean, 2016, I guess you could say that
i'm
almost
I mean
that sort of sits by itself.
I
Uh,
mean, there were like people out in the streets with like, padlocks and like tube sots and shields and not swords, but like large sits, like out in the street beating each other, like after, you know what I mean? Like it was
but
like
which one? 2016, you mean?
2016, yeah.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
people really looked like they were LARPing. Now it looks a little bit different in 2020. Like some of the, like, I saw like the Proud Boys rally last night, or I don't know. I shouldn't call it Proud Boys rally. Maybe it was a Stop the Steal rally is a better way to describe it. But they're just like a lot more like cheap shots kind of stuff going on, where people are running up and macing people, and this seemed to be happening on both sides. Like I didn't watch enough coverage to make a call either way, but it some guy wrapped in an American flag, assume he's on the Trump side because of that, walked up and sucker punched some like dude in the back of the head. Like it seems like there's a lot more of that kind of stuff going on. Where in 2016 it was more like literal like LARPing, except like people had like weapons ish, not really, but kind of.
Yeah, again, I don't think that one night or one rally tells the story, because this has been a rolling thing that's been going on, hatred, and the tit for tat, and like the sucker punches. Well, yeah, they'll say, well, that's for what's the guy's name? They came up, hit him with a skateboard, and he shot and killed people. Kyle,
Written, yeah.
sorry, I can't remember.
It's
Rittenhouse.
no.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah, yeah. It's a
There we go.
square in Philadelphia. That's how I remember it. But yeah, so this is a there's probably it's almost like a ladder of escalation. So I have a hard time seeing any one protest. But one thing I do know is that, in the past, the right wing, or I mean, there's a mix, right? That some of them are just really pro-Trump. Some of them are this, ultra right wing supremacists. I guess there's some of those mixed in too. So the way their actions or anticipated actions were described in the media and among um, the chattering class, it always disappointed. We were expecting just this terrible stuff to happen, and then the event would be over, and it would be like, wow, those guys aren't really revolting very much at all. All the things that they were projected to do, or that there were leaks that were plans for this or that, and it just didn't happen. Well, I think that in this last few days, we are starting to see some, like, they were a lot of bark and no bite. Let's just really simplify it. I think there's a little more bite now to it, and unfortunately, there are some people who seem to like want that to happen, provoking that, and there are other people who absolutely are just worried about it, the reaction. So the Stop the Steal rallies, they seem to be not much of a big deal. I think they've been going on at least for a few weeks. But then these ones converging on DC happened. I didn't even know this was going on yesterday until I saw some of the stories in the live streams, and that Michael Flynn did a big, rallying speech, and uh, that other guy, Gorka. And there's some people turning into a religious thing, others into a rallying cry thing. And Flynn now is speaking after being quiet for 3-4 years, and I guess it's becoming more apparent that maybe he has all along been a factor, maybe from behind the scenes. He was playing a role in the movement. If he wasn't, he certainly is now. And so, but last night, then we had the stabbings, right? So this protest counter protest has been going on for a long time. I'm a big fan of live streams. You know that, Kyle, because I send them to you a lot. And because I'm worried my kids are going to get caught up in one of these things, because they happen to be in some of these cities where these things are happening. So there was a stabbing incident in front of a bar. I have my notes. I think it's called Harry's or something, and I was surprised that bars were even open in DC, to be honest. So that happened. That was reported in Washington Post today. Today's Sunday. We're recording this, and just it says thousands of maskless rallygoers who refused to accept the results of an election turned downtown Washington into a falsehood-filled spectacle Saturday, 2 days before the Electoral College will make the president's loss official. Just the framing there, first of all. And the funny thing was, right above this paragraph is a picture from the rally, and half the people in the picture have masks on. I'm like, you dummies, why didn't you at least get a picture where they didn't have, they all didn't have masks on? But they set the whole thing up as, these guys, they had it coming. They had it coming before they even give you any details about the stabbing. And, I don't like that. I'd be really pissed off if this happened to some faction or candidate that I supported. But I don't like it when it's done for people I don't support either. Because if you don't call this kind of stuff out, it blows back. It always blows back. If you're on the left, because they're eventually coming for you, and they will, if certain tactics become normalized, they'll be used on you. But some people just seem too stupid to realize that. They enjoy the sport of it in the moment, and they just don't realize the precedent's being set. And that statement applies not only to this thing, but to this whole thing. Is one of the reasons I'm most upset about it. But anyway, it put people in the hospital. Maybe there's some new news now, but there are no names released in this article. It just basically builds up. Um, so to make sure you have no sympathy for whoever it ends up being reported was stabbed, and it says that some police got some minor injuries, but the victims were hospitalized and suffered possibly life-threatening injuries. I did skim through Ford Fisher's live stream on it, and he said there was a lot of blood. And I'm going to talk to him later this week, so I guess I'll hear more about that. So that worried me a lot because there are a lot of people saying a civil war is brewing. Some people say it out of genuine concern, but other people treat it like something they wished, something they're almost like a sport thing or a political implications, or will have political implications that they wanted, which is hard to imagine.
I
But I mean,
also
there are other people who are just happy. Look, if they're attacking each other, this is as old as time, right? If they're attacking each other, then they don't focus on us.
I would just add I think there's a lot of like it's a good sell. It's it sounds threatening, right? And so if you're in the media, it's something that's gonna, if you're predicting civil war, that's something that people have to sit up and pay attention to. Where, if you're just talking about, well, a couple people threw some rods and like a guy got maced, but overall there were like 10,000 people there and most everybody just yelled at each other and went home. Right? Like one of those things sounds a lot more exciting than the other. I'm not. I understand. Like in this particular case, like people got stabbed and everything, but a lot of like the things that people use to build off of the Civil War claims are like relatively minor encounters, and for all the claims of like all the horrible things that were going to happen in the U.S. over the past 4 years, like there has been violence in the streets, and people have been died, and things have happened in that violence, but for the most part, like there's not bodies piling up here. You know what I mean? It's not massive, and I would say the bigger thing probably that leaves like lasting marks is the property destruction in these cities where they permanently shut down businesses and stuff like that and destroy like like the business area for like entire community. Like that's probably gonna hurt the community in years to come, but I mean, overall, I think the violence will obviously impact the victims of it or whatever, but for the community at large, I think people are gonna like kind of get over it and forget it as long as it doesn't keep escalating. I don't know. Is there like what else do we have on election? I mean, so the libertarian podcaster Dave Smith has been making the point that it seems like Biden's going to be installed, is the word that he used, as president on January 20th. What do you, is there any chance that something changes that, or is it just going to continue forward?
I don't see one. I haven't seen a path to victory for quite a while now. Not because it may have been legitimately earned, but there's just he's just up against too much. Powers that be who have decided that that is just not going to happen, and I think for that reason it's not going to happen. Whether he won or not, I don't know. I think there's a very good chance that we'll never know. It's going to be like one of those decades long things where people argue back and forth and the conspiracy theories swirl and all of that. But no, I think Biden's going to be in office. Yeah.
All right, are we ready to move on to the Mike Morrell stuff?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Do you think we should start with the video of Mike Morrell?
Yeah, I think I like that video. I mean, I hate that video.
Yeah. All right.
So I like it as a good example. Yeah.
All right. This is about a minute and 40 seconds. You'll hear the video that me and Joanne will talk about.
I'd give them the things that they need to both go after the Assad government, but also to have the Iranians and the Russians pay a little price, right? When we were in Iraq, the Iranians were giving weapons to the Shia militia who were killing American soldiers, right? The Iranians were making us pay a price. We need to make the Iranians pay a price in Syria. We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing I would do...
We make them pay the price by killing Russians?
Yes.
And killing Iranians?
Yes. Covertly. So you don't tell the world about it, right? You don't stand up at the Pentagon and say, we did this, right? But you make sure they know it in Moscow and Tehran. Here's the other thing I want to do. I want to go after those things that Assad sees as his personal power base, right? I want to scare Assad. So I want to go after his presidential guard. I want to bomb his offices in the middle of the night.
Well, that happened about 2 years ago, as you remember, when his brother-in-law was...
I want to destroy his presidential aircraft on the ground. I want to destroy his presidential helicopters. I want to make him think we're coming after him, right? I'm not advocating assassinating him. I am not advocating that. I'm advocating going after what he thinks is his power base, right, and what he needs to survive. I want him to think about this is not going to end well for me, right? I want to put pressure on him. I want to put pressure on the Iranians. I want to put pressure on the Russians to come to that diplomatic settlement.
All right, Joanne. Yeah, so Ray McGovern says this guy's on Biden's short list to be the next CIA director, and based on that video, I'm scared. How about you?
Yeah, listen to the guy. Listen to him, how nonchalantly he talks about, just going in and killing Russians with no... I didn't hear one even slight hesitation to think, I wonder what, the consequences of that might be. The other thing that struck me, Kyle, was I want to do this. I want to do that. This. Who does he think he is?
Yeah, no,
it leaves me kind of speechless.
Yeah, well, I see that, and this seems to be one of those guys like the Obama administration types that's really scary because, like a Michelle Flournoy or a Jake Sullivan, I think they really believe that they could change the world with killing the right people. They see that as their way that they're going to make the world perfect. They're going to identify and kill the bad people, and that's going to make the world a better place. And for whatever reason, they're uniquely qualified to decide who's bad and who's good and who gets to live and who gets to die. And I mean I think that has to be your world outlook if you're, this person. In this article by Ray McGovern here from Consortium News, and it was reprinted at antiwar.com. For people watching the video feed, I'm scrolling through it as me and Joanne talk about him. Ray McGovern also brings up Jacob Sullivan, who's, these are younger guys. I mean, this isn't even like Henry Kissinger, feeling like looking at this from a very academic and intelligent perspective. These are they're so flippant about it, which is in part that's so shocking, right? That, I mean, that you could be this person, this young of a person, and not only believe that how to run people's lives in the United States, but also how to make things best in Syria by killing people from a third nation. I mean, it's really crazy. That much. Yeah. Do you have anything else on the Syria apart from Morrell?
Well, no, I think he spoke for himself, but I want to just pick up on one of the things that you said. You've described him as one of the people from the Obama era, but really, and of course, Ray lays this out in great detail. He's a product of the Bush years, and what they got away with there. I mean, he even did it sort of a mea culpa, as Ray points out in the article in his book. He does this mea culpa, but at the end of it, he says, "But it wasn't really my fault, you know." But he admits, he says in Morrell's memoir, he wrote that he wanted to apologize to Powell, Colin Powell. Morrell says, quote, "We said Saddam Hussein has chemical weapons, he has biological weapons production capability, and he's restarting his nuclear weapons program. We were wrong on all three of those." So he states that flat out. My first thought is, well, then why the hell would anyone ever hire you to work in such a high level position in their administration? Like, but you know, and then it says that right after that he said, "But it's not my fault," wrote Morrell, who tried to shift the blame by claiming that he was not a senior official at the time. And of course, that is not a credible statement either, because Ray had already set the stage for Morrell being the person who did the I forget the name of these reviews and assessments and briefings, and I'm sorry, I forget the specific thing that that I think Tennant wrote in his book, that Morrell had actually prepared all of the briefing and the things that went into Colin Powell's infamous UN speech.
Yeah, so yeah, Morrell briefed Colin Powell on all of that, which is interesting because I think I remember like Larry Wilkerson saying prior to Colin Powell getting that briefing, like they had brought up, like him and Colin Powell had brought up reasons that they were skeptical, and then the CIA came back with what turned out to be fake evidence, I think, claiming that Zubaydah had tied Saddam to 9/11. And so that I don't know if it was presented by Morrell, but it seems like he at least would have been in the chain to you know, to tell the truth there. Now, the other thing that I just think is so important to note is that this guy, you know, acknowledges that he lied to Colin Powell. And I think a lot of people have acknowledged and identified Colin Powell's speech being fairly important to America's decision to go to war in Iraq, right? Now, when the now late Representative Walter Jones realized the mistake he made, as you know, one of a majority of congressmen that voted to go to war in Iraq, you know, that small, that you know, in a way, you know, I think compared to what Morrell did on the intelligence side, kind of a small role. He felt so bad that for the rest of his life he wrote apology letters to, you know, families of you know, and American veterans who were, you know, harmed by the, you know, his war and his decision. And Morrell's, you know, there are high level people. It really wasn't on beat.
Yeah, and he's a torture apologist as well, whether that was a defensive measure or not. And I feel like the only reason why he made any of these admissions was because of just the utter failure and the complete change of public opinion on the whole thing, and the fact that that the media at the time did publish things, did report things that were either leaked or, you know, figured out or whatever. We could speak then. There was plenty of, you know, trash cheerleading media as well, but there was at least some, enough to get through, enough to change almost the entire country's mind about the whole thing, to the point at this point we have some, according to polls, some overwhelmingly large percentage of people who not only don't support the Iraq War, but now they say it was never worth fighting. And that includes the veterans, a poll of veterans, and another poll of general public with similar outcomes. So, I don't know. I don't think that Morrell would ever have made any of those admissions had it not been for, you know, for that course of events.
So as important as this guy's history is, Joanne, And, especially how many people do you know that vote for Biden who, had this idea that Biden would surround himself with better people than Donald Trump. And that's one of the reasons to elect Joe Biden, even if Biden wasn't, there's things you could find in his past that he said that are clearly racist. He supported there's so many flaws in this guy's past. Plus, no matter how you feel about Joe Biden, he's clearly not at the peak of his mental capabilities anymore, right? And so there was a sense that, this guy's advisors are going to be fairly important. And so, nice talking about all the damage that this guy has done in the past, but what do you think this nutcase is going to do once he gets this power, assuming he becomes CIA director?
Who, Morrell?
Yeah.
He's a second bite at the apple at Syria for sure. God only knows what in Ukraine, and they'll just pursue the regime change, the ultimate regime change in Russia, which seems to be what they're obsessed about in the Brzezinski mindset. And it's interesting because I saw another article that Lavrov had spoken out very recently. Like, let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, here we go. Just a couple days ago, I guess, Lavrov made a big statement. He said, the article says, saber rattling in the West is down to the fact that the US and the EU have woken up to the idea that Russia as an independent power, and they don't appreciate the challenge, according to Moscow's top diplomat who spoke frankly to RT. And he talks about that their goals are to not allow us, speaking for Russia, to make our own decisions about ourselves, to be an independent nation, and that they just constantly pursue regime change and they want to slice and dice Russia. So I haven't heard him talking about that in a while, and now he's bringing it up again. And I think that's part of the reason why, is because the people who Biden is bringing into office.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking of this a little bit more, not from the great power competition, which is certainly a very important thing to keep our eye on, but how this is going to impact the U.S. terror war and Mideast wars going forward. As I don't think that Biden would support like a re-invasion of Iraq. Sending another 100,000 troops on the ground. But it seems like what you're getting from people who have influence in the Biden administration and people that we're seeing, Jake Sullivan, Avril Haines, Michelle Flournoy was floated. Now we have Mike Morrell. These are all people who like counterterrorism programs, drone killings. I think a lot more targeted assassinations. I think it could spread to more countries. I have my eye on Nigeria because I've seen Black Lives Matter, very interested in the protest movement going on there. But overall, I think my concern here is that there's going to be more, trying to pick groups and countries that Morrell thinks the CIA could help to overthrow the dictators we don't want. So you say doubling down Syria. I think it could happen in many more countries. We highlight Russia there, him saying that he's going to kill Russians. He also said Iranians in Syria, Syria too, I believe. And so this guy isn't somebody who's, dovish on Iran. He's also an Iran hawk and concerned about, Iranian influence in Iraq and stuff like that. And so, curious to see what kind of groups the U.S. and the CIA are looking to back in Iraq under, a Morrell, CIA directorship. So, yeah. Anything else here on Morrell?
Yeah, well, they issued a decree, including John Kerry, who's now back and taken a great demotion. Now he's the climate change czar. I have a feeling maybe his real role is to play a big part in the National Security Council or things like that, or help at the UN. I'm not sure. But, they parroted the same thing. Assad must go. Assad must go. It was a decree and it was defied, and you're not allowed to do that. That's why I think whether it makes sense in the bigger picture or not, it's just, and look at the guy's attitude. I want to do this. I want to do that. It's never, now you understand why there's the foreign policy strategies never make any sense, right? Because you got guys like that. And they've been around too long, and
And they've been wrong about everything. Like if you're gonna say like, I think we should go to war, or I think we should kill Russians, I think we should go to war in Syria, I think we should go to war in Ukraine, you better have a very good track record on the wars that you have recommended. Like, you got to be batting 1,000. You know what I mean? Like, you got know when like to take balls and everything. And this guy is one of the worst at it from the record that we've seen. We point out he's an apologist for torture. He's wrong on Iraq. He tells Colin Powell the wrong evidence to lie us into that war. He wants to get more involved in Syria. He's wrong about everything. And yet,
he is.
He's the guy that gets to say, I want to do this, and the world empire is going to do it. It's crazy.
And he has little to no public support for any of those initiatives. Right?
Well, I mean, does the CIA want or care about public support? I guess. I mean, in fact, if maybe the public doesn't support it, and to be honest, it's foreign policy, so they're probably not going to care about it. It may be better not to have the support, because then you could do it covertly. I mean, if people are excited about it, they might pay attention to it. There's a lot of just people online that are very good at figuring out what's going on in the world. I mean, I'm not saying that, they would blow up all the CIA secret plans or anything like that, but if the people really support it, then it might be more overt, where if it's like something that then people don't really support, but they really don't know anything about it. I mean, that might be a better position if you're the CIA to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, we could come full circle here. I think that things like that, which waging more covert wars, it's not a new thing, right? So we're not trying to claim that it's a new thing. But I think the Obama administration took it to another level. They kind of by necessity, right? They just, Bush had just rolled out a giant, hundreds of thousands of troop invasion and attempted occupation. And there was no appetite to do something like that again. So if they wanted to continue with their wars, they kind of had to go down that route. But at the same time, the special operations developed into, I think, something that maybe it was never supposed to get to that level. And there were articles, kind of big blockbuster articles about the way that Obama and John Brennan waged their own wars from inside the White House. And they clashed with the Pentagon at times because they wanted to wage wars. And the Pentagon was like, well, hold on for a second. We got a plan. We got to make a plan. And they're too slow to move. But also, you have to do things like it has to make sense, or slightly make sense anyway. And so they were impatient. And so John Brennan was a CIA guy. And I guess, he was a fan of the paramilitary thing. And the whole thing just really, it just took on a life of its own. And so I think, that's where we're going to go back to. And I guess in the Bush years, we saw just an explosion of privatized militaries. And as far as I know, that has just continued to grow. And it's also convenient in a country that is generally doesn't support any more wars unless it's true defense. And so, you just get some mercenaries. I mean, hey, you let the military train them, and you hire the people who, just come off of deployments, and that saves you, you get all kinds of advantages. So I think it'll be things like that. I think it'll be really secret. I think Trump really helped that along by keeping more things secret, by giving generals on the ground more autonomy over what they do. I think some of those things will continue. Um, but I, uh, I don't think it will be a good thing. I don't think, I hope anyway, that we won't have this constant worry about whether somebody's gonna, be able to pull off a major attack on Iran. We probably don't have to worry about that. Maybe. I don't know what kind of deals Biden made to get the support of various people. I mean, well, I guess that remains to be seen how much the neocon influence has in his cabinet, because he certainly had support of some of the most prominent neocons. So I don't know. That's unprecedented. This alliance between the biggest warmongers in the country, some of the worst people in the world, in my view, coming together for this. I don't know. I'm afraid to really predict what they might do.
Right. Well, I have to say, as much as it seems like Biden wants to get back in the JCPOA and that he has put people in, positions around him that seem to want that as well. My concern is that there are a number of Senate Democrats who are not good on this issue, who are Iran hots, and who will oppose it. Now, I don't think Biden's going to need any kind of Senate approval to do this. However, we've seen Congress try to force the president to be more hawkish with this current NDAA by saying that you can't remove troops from Afghanistan unless certain conditions and reports and everything come out and is met and everything. Just like in the past, they've prevented Donald Trump or presidents from lifting sanctions on different countries. And so I'm worried that something like that is going to happen, or that it just quickly becomes too much of a political expense for Biden, who I think is going to be far more concerned about his domestic agenda and decides to punt or simply ignore the Iran issue or not, get back in the JCPOA. And I don't know if that could simmer for 4 more years with people like Mike Morrell as CIA director to make sure that intentions are ramping up in the background with these covert kind of timber sycamore arm the Syrian jihadist plans. Who knows who they're going to be willing to support to try to attack the Houthis or support the MEK. I have a lot of concerns that, it would be something like a Biden administration sleepwalking into a war with Iran. But we are getting to an hour here, Joanne, so we may want to wrap this up soon, but I want to let you say whatever, to respond and stuff.
Yeah, well, I would say again to sort of bring it full circle. First of all, I don't know, how cognizant Joe Biden even is of how much is going on or how capable he is of strategizing and this kind of thing. I honestly think that he's a front man. And the other thing is that I don't think political pressure is going to be a thing anymore, because I don't think we have elections anymore.
All right. Well, I mean, I see the point there. And, I think certainly when you look at it from as broad as a perspective as we do, libertarians have always said that there's no way they will allow Ron Paul to be president. Even if he had, enough people in enough states to vote for him to be president, they would make sure it wouldn't happen. And there's a lot of things that would happen up until that point. But this is something that libertarians have always said. It's not controversial. And in fact, most other people will say it to you. They go, they'll never let that guy become president. Why do you support him? I'm sure you heard that about Bernie a few times, right? That
futile effort. Yeah.
Right. They people will tell you they know that much. So hard to disagree with you, at least on that point, Joanne. So I guess
let me leave it on just a tiny bit more optimistic.
Okay.
There are going to have to be new ways to apply political pressure, given the sort of instant censorship that can happen, snap decisions that can happen, right? And the fact that elections are looking pretty dubious right now. So there has to be some new ways to apply pressure.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. And I think there's a lot of libertarians talking about that right now. And certainly some to think about going forward. How, yeah, I mean, I've never, I guess, considered my vote as a way to provide political pressure. So that's a good way to wrap it up, I guess, Joanne. My show is hosted at the Libertarian Institute. You could find it on the homepage along with the news roundup that I write. Also check out the YouTube channel, Conflicts of Interest. Joanne, it's aroundtheempire.com and Around the Empire on YouTube. Anywhere else other than your Patreon page where people...
You just find it on all the mobile podcast apps.
By the way, Joanne does bonus segments that, because I am a special person, I get access to. It's worth it. Definitely check those out. You give a couple bucks a month, help support the show and get that bonus content. So Joanne, thanks, and we'll have to do this again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Sorry it couldn't be a more, I don't know. I wish it would have been a better time to talk, but it is what it is, and we gotta the only way out of this is to go through it.
Right. All right.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Special thanks to Kyle Anzalone for doing this Swapcast with me, and follow Kyle on Twitter at @KyleAnzalone_. Subscribe to the Conflicts of Interest podcast. Find it at the Libertarian Institute and on YouTube. And this podcast is independent media, so listener support is important. Patreon.com/AroundTheEmpire, PayPal.me/AroundTheEmpirePod. Find it on all the mobile podcast apps or on the website AroundTheEmpire.com, on Patreon or on YouTube. And if you're listening on YouTube, hit the like, share, and subscribe. Also follow on Twitter @AroundTheEmpire. And we'll see you next time. Take good care, everybody.